wonderful 3:45 in the morning and a blackbird in full song right above my head, and two others singing further down the farmyard. 1st of June, dawn chorus is tailing off now at this time of the year. The sky is already getting light way over to the east. I'm just going to walk down to the duck pond and leave that glorious sound behind me, because I've got 4 goslings and they've spent their first night out of a little run that I've made to protect them from the foxes, but they're with their surrogate mum and dad. Oh, another blackbird. A different one with a slightly different song. A bit more of a warbler, that one. This time of the morning, you feel you've got the world to yourself. I love it. Oh, they're on the pond. Hello, gozzies. 1, 2, 3, 4, and mum and dad. That's great. They survived the night. No foxes. Hello, little gozzies. They're already half grown. It's beginning to get difficult to tell the difference between Quasimodo and Mildred and their 4 chargers. But Mildred, the ancient goose, is really very happy. I don't know how long they've been on the water, but it's a good sign that they've got through the night. Perfect. The glorious 1st of June.
Chris Skinner's Countryside Podcast with Matthew Gudgeon.
June is with us, and it's a lovely sunny day here for our weekly trip to High Ash Farm near Norwich, square mile of beautiful Norfolk countryside. And our guide, as always, is Farmer Chris Skinner. Chris, hello.
Hello, Matthew. Don't call me June is here. I'm Chris for certain. Well, what a wonderful sight we've got. Dark clouds threatening way in the distance, but a little bit of sunshine at the moment, and we're in one of the wildflower fields at High Ash Farm. And it is a real wildflower field. It's absolutely amazing.
Is this Oxeye Daisy?
Yeah, it's about a week from coming into full flower. There's an odd pink flower over there, which looks like a lupin, but much smaller, and that's sandfoin. And we'll talk about that a little bit. We'll visit another site for that. And each week we get a barrow load of questions, and there's one really interesting one to start us off this week. I don't know if you'd like to read it.
Yes, Anna Miller. Hello, Anna, in the Wenning Valley in Yorkshire, who says, We've got a fantastic floodplain meadow in the Wenning Valley here. Are they well established on your farm, and have they been there for many years, or did you redevelop them as part of conservation efforts? If so, did you use yellow rattle? Was there much that came through from the seed bank? Do you have orchids or any other interesting flora in them? Do you see agricultural flora around your other field margins, such as cornflower, poppies, marigolds? So a lot to unpack there, but I can see the wildflower evidence in front of me here.
Yes, and we have the annual ones as well. There's always lots of poppies. Corn marigold is a real favourite here. Cornflower as well. Lots of flowers. Sort of annual ones, and this is a perennial wildflower field. It's been here a great many years, and we're standing on sort of yellow boulder clay. It's really unusual soil type, and underneath that is a layer of clay with lots of chalk in it, and underneath that is pure chalk, and so it's ideal for one of those flowers that's mentioned. And what we do at this time of the year is we kind of follow the wildflowers through the seasons. We started off with sort of dandelions early on, and then it will finish with knapweed right at the end of the season, and ivy. So there's wildflowers sort of unfurl themselves. They all offer something special for pollinators, and there's a really unusual one around our feet. It's not tall at the moment, but it's a brilliant year because it's been warm, it's been very, very wet, as any farmer will tell you. We're always complaining about the weather, and in a week or two, these quite scarce flowers that are around our feet will be over a foot tall. They're all about 6 to 8 inches tall at the moment. And so I'm going to do something unusual this week, Matthew. I have bought underneath my arm a little waterproof blanket. It's the ground sheet for one of my tents. We're not allowed to camp in Norfolk, you see. You can have the little ground sheet, but I think there's an ancient bylaw that says you can't stay in a tent in Norfolk. It's called loitering with intent. So, sorry.
I wondered where that was going. By the way, Rat is with us, and Rat looks very happy in this situation.
He loves this. Right, I'm just going to pop this on for it. It's a luxury little mat here, and Rat is immediately on what we're going to lay on. Now, you've got to meet these flowers in front of us. They're orchids at eye level. So we're going to have to get down on that. I'll unfurl a bit for you so you don't get wet feet. And in front of us are amazing. Well, Rat gave me a kiss. He's very pleased with this arrangement. He's laying down beside me now. Now, the first time you see one of these, it's one of those things that kind of stick in the memory for the rest of your life because they're just so unusual, almost weird. So they're called bee orchids, and there's one just over here, and basically each one of them is in flower at the moment, and the whole field is scattered with them. You can see there's a kind of pink haze spreading away into the distance, and each one looks as though a bee has landed on the plant, and it's got pink wings, brilliant pink wings. That's why I said they're quite weird.
Yes, it looks like the body of a bee, doesn't it, with that furry sort of feel to it.
Exactly, and so you can actually touch that little body bit, and it does feel furry to the touch.
Yes, you're right.
Exactly like a bee's body. So they are really unusual, and we think over periods of time that the orchid developed this bee-like structure on the lower petal, if you like, to attract bees to come and mate with it. And that was a function. But there's a mystery which hasn't really ever been solved, and it's like this throughout nature, that bee orchids are self-pollinating. So why would you want to attract a bee? So maybe originally they were pollinated by bees, but very few people, including me, have ever seen bees landing on them. Although it looks like a lure is the only way to describe it. So there we are. A really strange plant as well, because down the edge of the field last year, it was pink, absolutely pink, with thousands of bee orchids. And I walked there yesterday for today's podcast just to have a look, because I knew it would be brimming with them, and there's not one to be seen, and that's absolutely typical of them. One year you can have thousands in an area, and the next year they don't appear for 4 or 5 years. They're erratic beyond belief in their appearance.
Orchids are a much loved department of the plant world, though, aren't
Yes, they
and
are.
some of them are extremely rare.
Yes, we have. We've got 5, or sometimes occasionally 6 species here each year, and over the next week or two we'll be visiting some of them. We have pyramidal orchid. We did one a couple of weeks ago, actually, early purple orchid, or long purples as they were called in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And they just have different flowering times, and some are, as you said, incredibly rare. But these have just started flowering, so if you're out and about walking in the countryside, really anywhere in the UK, particularly bee orchids spring up here, there and everywhere, particularly on chalk soils. It's a good time of year to see them, so we're kind of heading up, if you like, what to look out for as well. So these are only, 6, 8, 10 inches tall, something like 250 mil tall in new money, if you like.
3 pink petals.
And they should be over a foot tall in about a week's time. And some of them can have 8, 10, 12 flowers on them. And I have seen them about 18 inches tall. So they can get quite tall, particularly on a year like this when there's adequate moisture. We're on a south-facing clay slope. And so it's absolutely perfect for them with that high pH content. And one of the questions has also had, do I have yellow rattle? And here it is, right in front of us, a young yellow rattle plant in flower as well. And I have seen bees working on it, although yellow rattle is a semi-parasitic plant, and it feeds on the nutrients in the roots of neighbouring plants, particularly grasses. Look, and it's growing about an inch away from that bee orchid there.
Did you have to reintroduce some of these species?
No, it's... This is a funny thing about orchids. The seed is so small, it can be windblown, rather like sycamore seeds can blow off. They have a little wing on them, and when you get the autumn gales. But we think, or I think, there was a weed seed bank, if you like, although I don't like to call them weeds. They behave like weeds sometimes because they come up so prolifically.
That was Rat sneezing,
yes,
by the way.
It was. It wasn't me. Yes, he's obviously sniffed a bee orchid. He's going off to do some exploration now. So I think with the weed seed bank here in the soil, there was perhaps orchid seed, but they do get themselves about because deer graze on neighbouring fields. They'll graze in this particular field because of the sandfoin there, which is a favourite food for the large mammals, including hares at the farm. And if they brush past the orchids, the tiny seeds, it'd give you an idea how small they are. One pyramidal orchid can produce 40, 50, 60,000 seeds from a single plant. 1 teaspoon of orchid seed will more than adequately seed this whole 30-acre field. So it's absolutely microscopic. So they're full of surprises, and if you just start to get interested in our wildflowers, then a good place to start is with orchids, because they are so varied in the way they appear, the way they look, and they are exotic. There's one there with huge pink wings, and it really does look like a pink bumblebee has landed on it, and that's why they're entertaining and amusing. And of course, all the orchids have a familiar characteristic. If we dug one up, they're all the same, all the species, called a double ovoid tuber. One tuber would be larger than the other, and the smaller one will be foddering this year's green growth.
Well, all the orchids and all the plants on this field are now getting very well watered.
Yes, so are
it's
we.
Starting to pour.
So I brought this sort of ground sheet, so I think you can put that over your head, and so we've got to stand back up. There's quite a heavy shower heading our way, so I'll be a gentleman and I'll drape this round your shoulders.
All right, here we go. Yeah.
There.
Oh, it's nice and dry. That's very kind. Rat doesn't seem bothered at all. So we're on High Ash Farm. It's the Countryside Podcast with Chris Skinner. I'm Matthew. And Rat, well, the star of the show, is just bounding through the grass there and hasn't got a care in the world. This is nirvana for him, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Nothing he likes better.
The ducks at High Ash Farm going in to roost for an evening. Hey everyone, it's Matthew here, and if you've been enjoying our Countryside podcasts, we've got a small favour to ask.
Yes, Matthew. What we're going to do is to ask for a small donation to help run the podcast, and any surplus goes for conservation at High Ash Farm here. And so it's really important. We both love to keep the podcast going, and that duck agrees with me, I think.
Well, it's straightforward to donate. You can make a one-off donation or set up a small monthly contribution, and the address is highashfarm.com/podcast.
We're hugely grateful for any support. It means we can keep sharing the stories of the countryside, which I love doing each week, but it's that small amount of costs we need to cover. So thank you very much in advance.
Typical English summer's day, isn't it? 1 minute you're sheltered from the rain, that tarpaulin came in handy, and now we're bathed in sunshine as well, Chris, and we've come right to the other side of the farm.
Yes, we're in Stoke Holy Cross now, Matthew. The farm goes to Arming Hall. Caistor St Edmund is the centre of the farm, and this is in Stoke Holy Cross, so I almost feel I need a passport to come this far away from the farm. And I planted this one. Again, we're overlying chalk, but it's gravel over chalk this time, so it's really unusual soil type. The whole farm is a variety of different soil types. It's how the glaciers dumped the soil on top of the chalk layer millennia ago, and so it's a huge challenge, always has been, to farm it, but you kind of go with what you can grow here, and it was drought-stricken soil. And I decided, because it's right next to a public footpath which I've created here, a permissive walk, to entertain the local population at Stoke Holy Cross, to keep on good terms with them. And I popped this in 20 years ago, and I used a high legume content, again because the pH, the soil lime content, if you like, is very high here. It's around about pH 8, and so the main plants I put in was clover, and then a close cousin, which is also a legume, and I've talked about it several times before, but only because it's an absolutely brilliant pollinator. The deer graze it at the farm, they love it as well, and I'm just looking ahead. We only had rain 10 minutes ago, and it is absolutely swarming with bumblebees. A lot of the sandfoin plants have one or two bumblebees on, and this field in front of us is kind of magenta pink, I suppose. It's a tall plant, and it particularly does well in years like this when there's been adequate moisture.
It's up to about hip high, isn't it?
It
Something
is,
like that.
yes, and it's also really deep rooted, so it's extremely drought tolerant as well. And each of the flowers is just extraordinarily beautiful. It's that conical shape. And if we just grab one here, it's beautiful. And when you look at the actual flower, it's got these little lines on the petals. Can you see them?
Pinstripe.
Yes, exactly what it does look like. Pink and white stripes and a hint of blue there. And they're called honey guides. And that's why the bees love them, because at the base of each of the flowers is a nectary. And that's what those bumbles over there are feasting on. Look at them, they're just stunning. The buff-tailed bumblebees and a red-tailed bumblebee next to them. And there's also lots of honeybees working on here as well. That's a juvenile buff-tail just going through there. And another...
Oh, he's a beauty, isn't he?
Look at that. Absolutely. And if you look carefully on the hind legs of the bees, they have what's called a pollen basket. It's going from one flower to the next at great speed. It's just hopefully going to come round, and you'll see these strange, sort of almost like growths.
Honey-coloured.
Yes, that's pollen. on the legs. There they are, and
He's
it's
got
gathering.
plenty, isn't he?
Yeah, and it will carry that back to wherever its nest is, and the nest can be half a mile away, and that bee knows exactly where to go, kind of makes a beeline, if you like, for its home when it's fully laden. And it's quite a weight. It can be up to 20% of the weight of the bee in pollen. And it also has what's called a honey stomach as well, and it's gathering nectar. Nectar and honey are rather different products. Nectar has about 70% moisture or water in it, whereas honey, the bees work all day, they work all night, and they fan the nectar to get the right specific gravity. And once that happens, they seal it over, and that's what we call honey. So they're busy working away. But the plant is really good. It's nitrogen fixing, so it's taking nitrogen in from the atmosphere with special little what are called nodules on the roots, and that enriches the soil around the plant as well. So not only do you get tall sainfoin plants, we'll look at the grasses here as well. That's going to end up over 1 metre tall, that grass. That's tall meadow fescue, that particular one. So legumes enrich the soil, whether it's beans you're growing, peas, lupins, as I said before, and all the members of the clover family and some of the vetches as well. They're all leguminous. And it's glorious, isn't it? Just feel the sun coming out. We're only 3 weeks away from the longest day, Matthew, June the 21st. And it suddenly changes in a moment, the weather at this time of the year.
Yeah, you can feel the warmth and the lovely colour here as well. It seems to glow, the pink, and I think the bees notice certain colours more than others, don't they?
Yes, they do. They're attracted to colours, and particularly purples at this time of the year as well. And I said, you could come back in a week's time, and this will be bright yellow with all the sort of dwarf legumes that grow in the understory there. Things like bird's foot trefoil is one particular one, and that's a great favourite with some of our day-flying moths as well. So in a week or two we'll have patches on this field in front of us where you can walk in and 20 or 30 moths fly up, because they fly in the daytime as well. And they're burnet moths, 6-spot burnets we call them, and they're iridescent greens and almost the colour of this sainfoin with purple on the top side of the wings as well. But this is absolutely glorious. I could stand here all day. Oh, and there's wild carrot in flower as well, sort of one of the umbellifers.
The white flowers.
Yes, yeah. But just walk in a step or two, we won't hurt anything. This is just extraordinary. When you say bees are in short supply, just look. It's
every flower virtually.
Nearly every flower, and that's the result of having wildflowers that flower throughout the 3 seasons of the year at least, every year. And so gradually over the years the number of pollinators has built back up, and they've got a real reservoir that overwinter. Only the adult queens overwinter, but this will be mown in about late August, September time, right when everything's finished flowering. And the secret is to cut and remove it. You imagine if you chopped this and left it all here, it would be a mulch to stop anything growing, any gaps in the crop. And look at Rat, he's being the obedient dog for once in his life. He's sitting by my feet, because I think if he ran out in here he'd get completely lost.
You wouldn't, would you, Rat?
He knows where his home is, and he knows where his food is, let's put it like that.
Oh, it's a bit like me, really.
Yes. Right. Anyway, we've got several more questions to answer, but there's another flower just the other side of this field. We'll just drive round and have a quick look, because it's a perfect time of year to see it, and it's a real mystery plant. So we'll just hop back in the truck and go for a quick drive.
Got to say, if you want to picture the rural idyll of England, then here we are on this particular point on High Ash Farm. We're very high up. We can see woodland, we can see horses grazing, and then on the neighbouring property down in the river valley, we can see cattle as well.
Yes,
it's so
that's
beautiful.
my
here.
neighbouring farmer, that's Neil Peasgood, and that's his cattle grazing the old marshes right up to the edge of the River Tass. And so it's a very deep, steep-sided valley that was close to 3/4 of a mile wide, and the A140s on the far side, train just going up to Liverpool Street in London from Norwich. I mean, why would you leave Norwich, for goodness sake?
I think I'm in the right place.
Yes, and so that was obviously full of water millennia ago, and presumably that's all up on the ice caps these days. And I can just see the top of Norwich Cathedral in the distance over
Yes,
there.
a little stiletto heel pointed up.
Yes.
And that is it's the second tallest spire in the UK.
Yes, Salisbury's the tallest, just top trump Norwich by a few feet. But our cathedral's like to sink a little bit. It's right by the River Wensum at that point, and it's on marshy soil. How they built it, I do not know. But we've got some sort of stiletto-type plants right beside us, Matthew. Just look at these. But before we go in, some are coming up, and they haven't yet come into flower, and they're curled over, and it looks a little bit like a snake. And very appropriate. Just come over here. These are stunningly beautiful plants. It's probably one of the deepest blues that you can possibly imagine, and it's called Viper's Bugloss. It grows on impoverished soil, comes into flower at this time of the year, early June, right through to the beginning of July. And it's got this name. All buglosses have the same. It really comes from a word like ox's tongue, and if you just look at the whole plant is covered in fine hairs, and if you touch the stem, just put your finger on the stem.
Oh, prickly. Not prickly as in...
It feels like a tongue, ox's tongue.
Yes.
So bugloss. It's tall. This one will be up to 3 feet tall because of the dampness of the soil, although it's pure sandy gravel that we're on. And one of the very interesting features of it, before the flowers open, they're bright pink. The little pink buds look absolutely stunningly beautiful.
And then they turn a more blue colour, but it's such an attractive colour, that, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Long stamens coming out of each flower, very attractive, particularly to moths at night for some reason, more so than bees during the daylight hours. And then the seed starts to form. You can see some of the flowers are already started to form. And again, if I just pull one of the flowers to the side, it looks exactly like an adder's head, hence Viper, which is the name of our only poisonous reptile. It looks like an adder's head, all curled up there, ready to kind of pounce out at you. So
hopefully it doesn't.
What a lovely name, though, Viper's Bugloss. And because the whole farm is covered in unusual flowers like this, there's some away in the distance, it's always a pleasure to try and capture them at the beginning of each of their seasons, and particularly this year when there's lots of moisture. This one's looking absolutely perfect. So there we are, beautiful plants, not common, but again, like the bee orchids we saw, they suddenly spring up in masses in one particular place, and you might not see them again for a year or two. They're very erratic in their appearances, but beautiful nonetheless. I mean, it's difficult to capture that blue, but I just feel amazed that this is a wildflower rather than the sort of pride and joy in the centre of your garden display. Just nature does it just naturally.
The email address is chris@countrysidepodcast.co.uk, and every week we get dozens and dozens, and it's terrific to hear from everyone. Oh, lovely questions. We picked out a few from the post bag, and here's one from someone whose surname I think you particularly enjoy, Janet Raven.
Yes.
Janet says, "Dear Chris, please could you identify this photograph of a young caterpillar found on, I think, a hornbeam leaf. A small branch had fallen onto the ground and it was underneath when I picked it up. So what do you think, Chris? We've got the photo
I had
here
a
in
look,
front
and
of
it's
us.
an absolutely brilliant picture, which helps a lot. It's a caterpillar of the winter moth, and that's a really common species. Generally, we find them on these oak trees that are near us, where we're standing beside a road here at the entrance of High Ash Farm, and it's one of the commonest caterpillars. An unusual moth. It's called the winter moth because it flies in the coldest time of the year, round about the shortest day. The males seek out the females, which are wingless. They've only got rudimentary tiny little stumps of wings that are left, and the caterpillars then hatch out in the canopy up in the oak trees and let themselves back down to the ground on silken threads. So they're really brilliant food for either great tits, blue tits at this time of the year. They've all got all these young fledglings. But caterpillars, Matthew, if you just walk round here.
Thanks for the photo, by the way.
Look.
That was a terrific shot.
Yes, that's a tall furry plant. It's called Verbascum pulverulentum, the hoary mullein. And it's a favourite plant for another species of moth called the mullein moth. And we're right at the entrance of High Ash Farm, right by the road, and the caterpillars wreck people's mulleins that grow in their gardens. Just walk here and I'll show you what I mean.
Right on the roadside verge here. Oh my word. There's a very fat caterpillar there and several others.
Several others.
And this mullein is just gone, hasn't it?
Yes, it's absolutely...
Look at the size of him.
What, me or the caterpillar? Look, that's a good 50 millimetres long, stunningly beautiful. Look at these two at the top here. And the little brown dots are not eggs laid by the caterpillar. That's caterpillar poo, or frass as it's called. And this fellow here, how do you describe that colour? It's grey stripes with little black lines on the grey all the way down the body. Then there are yellow segments, bright mustard yellow colour all the way down, and that's the caterpillar of the mullein moth. Absolutely beautiful creature. The moth itself isn't much to look at, but the caterpillars are striking. And that leaf down there, which is a good 8 inches wide and 2 feet long, is just reduced to a skeleton. That's all you can describe.
It's just stalks.
Yes.
Eat your stalks, you won't get curly hair. Come on. Neil, Framingham Earl, not far away from here. Very, very... It's just up there, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Just about a mile up
End
there.
of this road.
So Neil Freeman has sent us a photograph of some, what look to me like spiders' webs. He says, we're big fans of the podcast. These photos were taken at Denton in South Norfolk and show what looks like spider webs completely covering a tree. The leaves look like they've been stripped from the branches, so maybe this and the webs were caused by caterpillars.
Certainly were, and 2 podcasts ago we did this very caterpillar. It's either the small ermine moth or the brown-tailed moth, 2 species. Both of them make these, the caterpillars themselves spin their own webs so the birds don't eat them, and spread out over the tree. And for some bushes like blackthorn and the one that we looked at, spindle, both native UK species, completely defoliate the tree and end up leaving it look the whole thing like a giant spider's web. Thank you. Brilliant picture again.
Now, of course, in Great Britain we have some wonderful place names, and one of the best is, well, not many miles away from here, a place called Slowly. And Tony and Frank are our Slowly correspondents, and I think it's Tony says, my hubby's new friend, can you let me know what it is? And there's a photograph of, and it looks like a beetle to me, but very brightly coloured.
Yes, it is. It's almost pale pink stripes on the top. On first glance I thought, oh my word, it's a Colorado beetle, a real pest of potato crops, but it's not. It's a female cockchafer beetle, again quite a common species, and if you look at the male cockchafer, it's got these large club-like antennae, all with feathery ends on them, and the female has the same structure but much smaller. They're large beetles. They're just very cumbersome flyers. They tend to fly into you late evening when they circle oak trees, and sometimes you can have a couple of hundred. Looks like a swarm of bees going around the canopy of an oak. So there we are, a female cockchafer beetle.
Julian Lawrence. Chris, attached is a picture of our meadow in our back garden. The yellow is mainly rattle that has started coming up, and as you, a great advocate of this, as you are a great advocate of this, can I ask what is the best way and when to collect the rattle seeds to help spread it again and keep it going, or does it appear each year by itself?
Yes, it will self-perpetuate very readily. You'll need some grass in the base of your wildflower field because it's a semi-parasite. Now, you have to use your ears to find out when it's ready to harvest. What you do, you go up to rattle plant and you give it a little shake, and if it rattles, you know the seed is ripe inside the little pods which form. If you leave it too long, the seed will all be on the ground. It's like tiny little paper discs with the seed in the middle of them, and they're extremely light. A bucketful's only about a kilo in weight, and you hardly need any, 4 to 5 little seeds per square metre, and that should be enough to kind of set the rattle off. And the reason you grow rattle is it makes it feeds itself on the grass, so the grass is less competitive in the wildflower environment, and that lets the wildflowers flourish much more than they would otherwise do. Wildflowers and grasses don't compete very well with each other. The grass will always top trump the wildflowers, some of which are really delicate. So that's why we have rattle on the farm here.
Wonderful questions. Thanks as always. Keep them coming. Chris at countrysidepodcast.co.uk. And the sun out once again. Yes. It's glorious. It's June.
Look at this, though, Matthew. What a way to finish. Another mullein plant over there with all the black droppings. I'm laughing, but it's such a beautiful caterpillar. And I think if you grow mullein in your garden, then it's just a small price to pay. Don't pick them off and squish them. Enjoy them. And it's all part of nature, as indeed we are.
And that's it for another week from High Ash Farm. Enjoy summer. We yearn for it, don't we, for months. And once it's here, it's so much to enjoy.
And the colours as well. Absolutely beautiful.